ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. All praise is due to Allah. May Allah's peace and blessings be on the last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and on all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. The companion about whom I will be speaking is Mus'ab ibn Umair. And Mus'ab represents a figure, a hero from that first generation about whom Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said, "Khairun nasi qarni." The best of people are my generation. From that blessed generation, a generation that lived with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were among them shining stars who left behind them an example which would serve to guide the believers until the last day. These individuals, as in all societies, there will be outstanding individuals who by themselves create changes in the flow of history or in the flow of the society. Mus'ab ibn Umair was one of those. He was born in Mecca in an extremely rich family. He lived a pampered life. He was known as a playboy. He, with his riches, finely dressed, very handsome individual, was sought after by many. However, when rumors began to spread in Mecca of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's teachings, something struck his heart and created a curiosity which led him to seek out the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In spite of his position, his background, and his experience, in spite of that, something struck him. Something inside himself caused Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to choose to guide him in this direction. He had certain qualities that may not have been evident externally as he appeared, but Allah, knowing what is hidden as well as what is obvious, gave him the spark of hidayah, guidance. So he began to search out where the Prophet ﷺ was teaching the message. And he eventually found the house of Al-Arqam, Al-Arqam's house, and went and sat amongst those who were listening to the teachings, and he was quickly convinced. It didn't take much. He heard the message in its clarity, as the Prophet ﷺ explained it from his own lips, and he was convinced. He took Shahada, he declared his faith then and there. He didn't hesitate. He didn't stop to think what the reaction of his family would have been, his tribe, his people. When he heard the truth, he immediately accepted it. Now, when he returned home and his mother found out his father was dead, his mother headed the family. She was a very strong personality. She tried everything to get him back out of Islam. She tried locking him up in the house, tying him to a chair. He wouldn't give it up. She tried to threaten him emotionally by telling him she would starve herself to death. This is emotional blackmail. If you don't leave this religion, I will die before your eyes. I will not eat. But Mus'ab, in spite of his youth, he understood what the issues were, and he didn't hesitate for a minute. He told her straight off, "Mother, if you had 100 souls dying one after the other, I wouldn't leave this religion." He didn't hesitate. And this is the mother, obviously. Prior to this, she was, pampering him. She's the one who gave him everything, and of course he loved her. Somebody who's going to look after you, take care of you in this way, naturally you're going to have real love for her. So he did. But the issues were clear. Allah speaks about these same issues in Surah Al-Ankabut, 8th verse, وَإِنْ جَاهَدَاكَ لِتُشْرِكَ لِي مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا. That if they, your parents, strive to get you to accept or to believe in partners along with me, then don't obey them. Then don't obey them. Mus'ab ibn Umair, without hearing that verse, he knew it. It was clear. So she decided to just imprison him in the house, not allow him to leave, period. And under those circumstances, Allah willed it that he was able to sneak out, free himself from the bonds, sneak out, and he joined up with the group that was going to Ethiopia, the first hijrah to Ethiopia. He joined up with them and went. Left. Whilst he was there in Ethiopia, word came that some changes had taken place in Mecca. Things were improving. So he decided to come back. When he came back, he was shocked to find it hadn't gotten better. In fact, it had gotten worse. People wishing that things would improve. Sometimes wishes end up as rumors, and rumors end up as facts, and all of a sudden you have false information, some serious false information. So he found himself back in Mecca, facing his mother once again, where she is now threatening him. with expulsion from the house, because she now realized that there's no way to convince this guy. So only thing left is, okay, get out. You will have nothing more to do with the family. You're dead to us. End of story. So Mus'ab, having lived a very luxurious, pampered life, now was out on the streets, homeless. So he joined some of the other companions who, like himself, were homeless and who were just living in the streets. There was a group of young men who had similar circumstances, but the others were not from that level of the society as Mus'ab. So one of them, Sa'd ibn Malik, he was talking about that circumstances, and he was saying that that he and his other friends, used to feel hungry and struggle in that period of time before they emigrated to Medina. And it was really a difficult circumstance for them. They had difficulty in handling it. But for Mus'ab, it was 10 times worse. And he described him, because he had lived this soft, easy life, now he's out on the street. He described him, as having to live on the streets now that the skin on his feet and his hands and all this were peeling. He describes it like a snake when it sheds its skin. It was like this. It was just, that lifestyle was just so tough. And he had been living such a soft life, that this was the impact it had on him. It was very, very severe. So, at any rate, he didn't complain. He used whatever was available for him. He lived in rags, skins, and he never made any attempt to come back to his mother to try to change his situation. He accepted it as it was and continued on. At the same time, he studied with the Prophet ﷺ as a young person, a sharp mind. He learned. He gained a good bit of knowledge. There is not much in the seerah describing this period of time, but we know that he had become one of the most knowledgeable amongst the companions, who at the same time had the kind of character and way of dealing with people that made him the ultimate da'i. So that when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had reached out to the various tribes during the period of Hajj, because for Hajj people used to come from all of the various tribes, would send delegations, and they would make the rites of Hajj. Of course, they were distorted, corrupted. People were making tawaf around the Kaaba stark naked. So it was something else altogether. It wasn't Hajj as we know it. But they gathered, and some of the issues and rites of Hajj were there. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used this opportunity to reach out to the various representatives of the various tribes from different parts of Arabia to see if he could convey the message and find support for Islam as an alternative to the situation in Mecca. He had already tried to convey the word to the people of Mecca, Ta'if, places which are close by, and didn't receive a very good response. So he was then reaching out beyond Mecca and its area. Maybe some of the brothers here would like to move across to this side here, because there are people coming and standing up here to make it easier for them. You know, we have this side over. So, as I said, that the Prophet ﷺ conveyed the message of Islam to the tribes, and among the tribes that came were representatives from Madeenah, that was referred to at that time as Yathrib. And when some members of the tribes of Madeenah heard the message, they recognized in it something that they had heard before from the Jews. The Jews had warned them about the coming of the last prophet, who would lead them and cause them to conquer the rest of the Arabs. So they saw this as an opportunity to join up with that last prophet before the Jews did, so they would not be on the losing end. So a few of them accepted Islam and they went back to Medina. But in going back to Medina, they asked the Prophet ﷺ to send someone to teach them. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ chose Mus'ab ibn Umair. There were other companions that we know about. There's Abu Bakr, there's Omar. All these people were there. But the Prophet ﷺ chose Mus'ab ibn Umair. Chose him because he had the qualities that the da'i, one who would be calling to Allah on the highest level, should have. Because Medina was to become the home of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it was to be prepared. Therefore, whoever he was sending had to be capable of doing that job, of preparing Medina to receive Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke about Mus'ab, he spoke about him in the same way, that he was a pampered, rich, indulgent youth, but Islam changed his whole lifestyle, changed his whole perspective, and turned him into another individual who had no care or concern about his material state. The fact that he was now living a life of rags after having lived the life of riches meant nothing to him. Because spiritually, though he was living materially the life of riches, he was actually in poverty spiritually. So he was in the rags then. His spiritual state was ragged. His family, his people worshipped other than Allah. So he shifted from that state to a state of riches spiritually. Though materially he now appeared to be in rags, spiritually he was in a state of ultimate riches. He understood the faith, he had accepted it, and was living that faith. So Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, knowing that Mus'ab was one who could bear in spite of his background, could bear the trials and the difficulties that a da'i is bound to face when he's involved in giving da'wah, and knowing also that he had knowledge, that he would be able to teach the people of Madeenah. He was going there with two roles. One, to teach those who had accepted Islam, and two, to convey Islam to those people of Madeenah who didn't know Islam. So he had two roles to play. And the Prophet ﷺ chose him as the best to fulfill those two roles. So when he went to Madeenah, he linked up with one of the people of the major tribe by the name of As'ad ibn Zurara, and stayed in his place. And As'ad would funnel people into his home for Mus'ab to give da'wah to them. Or he would take him to different homes and give da'wah to them. Most of the time he would stay in As'ad's place, As'ad's garden, and bring the non-Muslims to him. They'd sit down and he would give them the message of Islam. In this way, the religion of Islam began to spread among young people. He was himself a young person, so he was attractive to younger people. And whilst he was there, he established Friday prayers. Actually, the Friday prayers were first done by Mus'ab ibn Umair in Madeenah. He is the first one to establish it, because in Mecca, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was not able to establish it there. They prayed, but the establishment of Friday prayers, no. He established it there with the permission of the Prophet ﷺ in Madeenah as a means of gathering the people together in group prayer. One thing we can also take from what has transpired so far in the story of Mus'ab is that for the purpose of da'wah, when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ sent Mus'ab, he sent him to Madeenah not for 3 days or 40 days or 4 months. He sent him to live with the people of Madeenah and give that message. There was no time. He was sent not as a new convert to Islam. He just newly converted to Islam, or he didn't know very much about Islam. He didn't send him to Madeenah and say, okay, go hang out in Madeenah for a few days and come back. When Prophet ﷺ sent the companions out, he sent the knowledgeable. He sent those who had knowledge, who could teach. Because that's what their job is going to be. The job is not about just getting out of the environment. Okay, you get out of the environment when you need to do that to survive. They went to Ethiopia. Got out. Went elsewhere. So when we talk about giving da'wah, and this is a very important point, if we're talking about shifting location, you're going somewhere else to go and give da'wah. Otherwise, where you are right here, there's plenty of da'wah to be given. If you're going someplace else, one, you should have sufficient knowledge to teach others. And two, you should go there for the duration, for as long as it takes. That is the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ. When he said Mus'ab, he didn't give him a number. 3 days, 40 days, 4 months. He didn't give him any numbers. He sent him to get the job done. And he chose him because he had the qualities necessary to get that job done. So Mus'ab continued to give da'wah, to convey the message of Islam to the people of Madeenah, known at that time as Yathrib, until the word spread to the head of the Ash'al tribe. This was led by Usaid ibn Hudayr and Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. When Sa'ad heard, he turned to Usaid and said, "We've got to stop this man. He's corrupting our people. I want to go personally. I would like to just go and finish him off myself. But he's staying with As'ad. As'ad is related to my branch of the clan, so I can't touch him. As a relative, I'm obliged to defend him, As'ad. So since As'ad had brought Mus'ab into his home, he can't do anything. So Usaid then said, okay, I'll do it. He's not my relative. I'll go do it. So he got his spear and he went to the house. Came into the garden. He saw Mus'ab and As'ad with a group that he was giving da'wah to. But before he could say anything, actually As'ad had seen him coming. So As'ad told Mus'ab, this man is one of the leaders of the tribe. If you can win him over, it will have a major impact on the tribe. So As'ad gave him the background of the individuals he's dealing with. So when Usaid came in with the spear, upset, raising his voice, shouting at Mus'ab, how dare he come into their city and corrupt, the young people, exploiting their ignorance, etc. Furious. What was Mus'ab's reaction? Did he jump up and say, "You ready to fight? Well, so am I." No. Instead, he said to him, "Why don't you have a seat? Gently. Why don't you have a seat?" Hussain couldn't hear that. He was still shouting and carrying on. So Mus'ab now tries another approach. He said, "Listen, just have a listen to what I have to say. If you don't like what I have to say, I will stop telling your people. I will. But if you like it, then you're welcome to take it." Actually, he was gambling. It was a big gamble here. Because he has a message to give. Is he going to stop giving the message if Usaid didn't accept it? That was a big gamble. Right? I mean, obviously what he was going to do was he would stop doing it in a way which would be annoying to Hussain and find some other channel to do it, because of course he can't give it up. That message he cannot stop. But to Hussain, this is what he said to him: if you don't like what I'm saying, I'll stop saying it to the people. So that was enough. Hussain said, that's a very good offer. That's a quite reasonable offer. I'm sure I'll sit down and listen at that rate. If you're ready to stop if I don't like it, of course. So he put his spear down, he sat down and listened. So Mus'ab gave him the message, recited some verses of Quran for him, and Hussain was knocked over. Couldn't resist. He said, what do I have to do to be a part of this? So they told him, go take a shower, go home, take a shower, clean yourself up, come back. He did, came back, water dripping from his hair, and declared his faith. So, after that, of course, now he's got a problem. Because he left his buddy, Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, to go and do one job, and he's now come back a part of that same problem, right? So what does he have to do now? When he came back, Mu'adh, Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, saw him, and he turns to the others and said, he looks different. He's not coming back the same way he left. He's got a different look in his face. But anyway, he came back to him and said, that actually, I've heard. He didn't tell him anything about the message, but he said, I heard that this group, another clan from Madeenah, they were going to send, for it's Bani Haritha, they were sending a group to go and kill Asad because of what Asad was doing. Right? Asad, who is a relative of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. Instead of telling him, listen, I went, heard the message, accepted Islam, right? Because of course he wouldn't want to hear that. So what he did was he tried to trick him emotionally to go there and listen. So how to get him? Because if he said, listen, I got convinced, it's a good word, why don't you go and listen also? No, that's not going to go over well. So what he did was he tried to motivate him emotionally to go there for the wrong reasons, but at least it would get him over there, because that's what he felt this is what he needed. He needed to just go there and hear. So of course, once Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh heard that this group from Bani Haritha was going to go and kill Asad, his relative, he had to go there and defend him. Even though what he was doing, he didn't like it, he was upset about it, he wanted to kill Mus'ab, he had to defend his relative. So he immediately got his spear and headed over there to stop the people coming from Banu Haritha. When he rushed there and came down there, and he saw Asad sitting there with Mus'ab and the others, he realized that a trick had been played on him. But anyway, he was already there. This is what to do. So he started on Mus'ab with the same stuff that Hussain had done. Shouting at him, cursing him, belittling him, and Mus'ab used the same technique. Why don't you sit down? Response, same thing. Couldn't hear him. Too upset, screaming, shouting. Then he made the same offer. Why don't you just hear what I have to say? If you're convinced by it, good and well. If you're not, I'll stop. I'll stop it. So again, that kind of an offer, but you can't resist. Because he already feels, I definitely am not going to accept it. So I just have to hear it and then tell him I don't accept it, and he'll stop and go. He made a deal like that. That's wonderful. Simple ending. And of course, same thing happened to him that happened to Hussain. He heard the message, he heard the Quran, and he said the same thing. What do I have to do to be a part of this? Same thing he was told, washed, came back, took his shahada. So now what to do? These are the heads of the Ash'al clan. What to do now? So what he did was he went back to his people and he said, O children of Abdul Ash'al, what do you know about me in my dealings with you? They said, you are our leader. You are the best in terms of good decisions, and our allegiance is to you. He said to them, in fact, your men and women are prohibited to speak to me until you believe in Allah and His Messenger. That's it. You can't come to me with any of your problems and issues that normally I resolved everything for you. I don't want to hear anything from anybody until you have accepted Allah and His Messenger. And by the evening, virtually every house of the clan had every man and every woman accept Islam. Mus'ab ibn Umair continued to give da'wah there, and he would go back to Mecca from time to time to sit with the Prophet ﷺ to get clarifications, get more knowledge, and he would come back and continue to teach. And he remained there when the Prophet ﷺ made the hijrah. He was there with the Prophet ﷺ in Madeenah. And after the Battle of Badr, when the prisoners were taken, and the Prophet ﷺ had decided to allow ransom for the prisoners, among them was Mus'ab's own brother, Aziz. He was among the prisoners of Badr. So when Mus'ab passed by the prisoners and he saw his brother there, he told the guard to guard this particular individual very carefully, because his mother is rich and she will give a big ransom for him. So Aziz, he was upset. Why did you tell him that? You're my brother. Mus'ab said to him, I'm not a brother to you. You're not my brother. My brothers are the Muslims. His issue of allegiance was very clear cut. And we know that in the Battle of Uhud, after that, he was martyred. He was given the banner to carry, and the enemy had cut one of his hands. He kept the banner in the stump of his one arm, cut the other hand. He kept it like this until eventually they knocked him off his horse, finished him off. But other companions, Ali, took a hold of the banner and carried it on. But in Uhud, he was martyred. He died. And when the Prophet ﷺ passed by the companions as they were preparing the various bodies of the martyrs of Uhud to be buried, and they came to Mus'ab ibn Umair, they found that the garment that Mus'ab was wearing was too small to cover both his head and his feet. If they covered his head, his feet was exposed. If they covered his feet, the head was exposed. So the Prophet ﷺ had told him to cover his head and cover his feet with some leaves from the tree. And that was the end of Mus'ab. He died in that state of simplicity, having started from a state of riches, success, accepting Islam and giving it all up for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah elevates him as a da'i, one who would teach others and convey the message of Islam to the community. And at the same time, he was committed to the message to such a degree that his mother couldn't affect him, and his own brother he didn't consider to be his brother due to his state of disbelief. And at the same time, he was a warrior, one ready to give his life when it was demanded of him for the sake of Allah. This is the complete picture of the da'i, of one who has sacrificed for the sake of Allah, has gained knowledge. That knowledge causes him to spread it, to teach it. It affects him so that his character is a winning character, one that can win over others. Gentleness is there, how he dealt with the roughness of those who sought to stop his da'wah, yet he dealt with them with gentleness. As Allah said, idfa' billati hiya ahsan. This is exactly what he did. But at the same time, that courage which he showed as a child, as a young person, when he first accepted Islam in Mecca, that his mother couldn't affect him, that same courage to be able to give up everything for the sake of Allah, we see it on the battlefield with him giving up his life for the sake of Allah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us a fraction of his courage and a fraction of his knowledge and a fraction of his faith. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to let this story have an impact in our own lives and motivate us to want to convey the message of Islam as he did. Because though in his case Prophet Muhammad ﷺ instructed him to go and give that message, in our case the Prophet ﷺ has left behind that message as a legacy to us, and he has instructed us also to convey the message, saying بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Convey whatever you have learned from me, even if it be only a single verse from the Quran. So we have that responsibility. As Mus'ab had it, we have it. There are differences in the circumstance of his life to ours, as there are differences in the circumstances of each and every one of our lives to each other. However, the overall responsibility of conveying the message of Islam remains on our shoulders, each and every one of us. Allah has brought us here. Allah has brought us here. We didn't come here for da'wah. The majority of us were here, we came for the dunya. Or our parents came for the dunya. So it is, even though we came with the wrong intention and Allah brought our parents, at the same time still Allah chose that we would be here. It was already written that each and every one of us would be here. So we have to accept that this is the choice of Allah. He didn't choose other members of our families that are back home in our homelands. He chose us. So He chose us for a reason. He chose us to carry the message of Islam to the people of this land. And He wouldn't have chosen us if we were incapable. As the Prophet ﷺ chose Mus'ab, Allah has chosen us. He's chosen us to do this job because we have the ability to do it. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not place on anyone's shoulder a burden which is too much for him or her to handle. This responsibility, this legacy of Islam, which we are carrying with us, we have the responsibility to convey it to the people of this land. We are in a unique position, a situation where Muslims are thrown together like Hajj. We're thrown together here. Normally, if you go back to our countries, the only people who would be around us in the village or the town or the city that we lived in were people like us, the same as us. Pakistanis, Egyptians, Iraqis, Malaysians, whatever. But Allah took us and threw us all together here to break down the barriers which have been artificially put between us. Those barriers of country, the national flag and the anthem and these things. To put these things aside, we have to come together and we work for the sake of Allah. As Muslims, we come together for the sake of Allah. We are brought here for the sake of Allah to do this job. So I hope, inshallah, that this story of Mus'ab, a true story of one of the champions of Islam, would motivate us, would cause us to want to make some real sacrifices to convey the message of Islam to the people of this land. We know what is out there, what opposes this effort. You've all seen dispatches where I am labeled as a potential, if not really terrorist, planning bombings and all kinds of foolishness. Well, we know that's what's out there. As people try to defame and belittle and make fun of the Prophet ﷺ, we as Muslims here have to expect the same. Allah will not put what was put on the Prophet ﷺ on us because we couldn't handle it. What is put on us is what we can handle. So, inshallah, we just have to be patient, keep focused, and let's get this job done. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.